I prepared a bunch of positions centered around a theme, and I thought I would start with just showing you a puzzle and then let you guys try and figure out what the theme might be. So this is white to move. It is not coming from an actual game, it's a study. And in this position, it looks like white is just losing because the h-pawn is just gonna promote in a very short time, and the king is very far away on b3. So white to move and survive. Yeah, this takes some creativity. And actually, what you said is not quite right. You said king a4?
Maybe the other, yeah.
So king a4, okay, let's imagine. Yeah. So if you play king a4 first, then black will play c4. And you can't do the genius stalemate idea. So you have to play c4 first. And just for those of you who didn't catch what you said, h4, white's moves are just automatic. And there's nothing black can do to unstalemate white. And it's just a draw. If we look at another line, let's say black sees this coming. And after c4, black plays king e2. What does white do?
Maybe just make a king move and then a pawn move. You want to preserve the pawn move. Try to make it a little.
So black's idea is to take on c4.
Yeah. So maybe king c3.
It's the exact same thing, yeah. I was trying to trick you guys, but in reality, the fact that black's capturing the c-pawn makes no difference. It's a4, wherever the king moves, it's still stalemate. OK, I'm going to give you guys one more slightly different but related position. Let's just modify this a little bit. And I've shown this to many students over the years, and a lot of them initially get it wrong. Same position, white to move, only this time the pawn is on h4 rather than h5. And the question is, can white draw using the same idea, or is there a way for black to win? Oh, time is very important. You don't want to waste time, because c3 would just make black's life a lot easier.
Yeah, you really need those two black pawns to stay where they are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I mean, still c4.
So yeah. Well,
But the hint, the black getting the queen one move earlier is not going to really change anything, right? Because
so I want everyone to calculate. I'm not going to move the pieces, but I'll just say the line and try and just visualize the position. So white plays c4. Black plays h3. White plays king a4. Black plays h2. King a5. h1, queen. a4. Does black have any move there to keep the game going? No. So what's the conclusion? Draw? Does anyone think it's not a draw? Everyone thinks it's a draw. Mm-hmm. There we go. So black is winning. Amazingly enough, the extra tempo is actually very, very important. So if we actually play the moves, and this is hard to see in advance, but you promote to queen, and then the only move to keep the game going is to actually sacrifice the queen. Pawn take, and this is a very straightforward one. King b5, d4, black will just promote the pawn. And to go back, one more funny thing, you could also promote to bishop. It's all other winning move here. Same idea, bishop d5. So 2 winning moves for black in that position. So there's a few themes that I want to take from this puzzle and then apply it to the other positions we'll see. The first theme is thinking outside the box. I think a lot of players would see this position as white and give up pretty easily, maybe play a move like king c4, or just resign, seeing the h-pawns coming down the board. And that's actually referring to the position with the pawn on h5. So what I want you guys to focus on or keep in mind is when you're in kind of a hopeless or seemingly lost position, that you look for creative ideas. Because sometimes sometimes miracles can happen, and sometimes you'll have an idea to come back and save the position. So that's what the theme is going to be about today, is saving lost or hopeless positions. And we'll see a kind of an array of ideas. We'll see a few games. Stop me if you have any questions. Try and make this as interactive as possible. Okay, this puzzle, okay, we'll start off easy and then get to a bit more difficult point. So this is white to move. I saw this type of idea as a very much beginner. White just has a knight and rook, and white to move saved the game, and black wants to mate next move. So the problem is, if you don't play a forcing move right away, and you play a move like rook g7, you're getting mated. Rook f1, rook h1 mate. So the only move really is knight c6, yeah. And yeah, so the idea is not stalemate, but it's perpetual. Is after knight a7, the king is just trapped. If the king moves back, you repeat. If the king moves to b8, you still repeat. And the only player that can win this position is white. If black missteps and plays king a8, then there's rook a7 mate. So I had this only once in a game, and my opponent actually walked into the corner and got mated in a better position. So you want to be careful for this. And also goes back to the concept that even though it looks like white's losing at first, there's the idea to not only save the game, but also create some chance to win the game. And we'll see this a lot in endgames, especially with knights and rooks. And actually, I guess 1,000 years ago, the rules of chess were different. And like queens and bishops were less powerful, but rooks and knights still had the same powers. So especially like in older chess, the knights and the rooks would coordinate very well. And they still do today, as we see in this position. So let's move on. Just go in order here. This one is going to be a lot more difficult. So I think what I'll do is I'll give you guys the first move or two, and then I'll have you come up with a final idea. So this is white to move and draw. Or sorry, white to move and not lose. It might be a draw. Maybe white will win. As we can see, black is two moves away from queening. And it seems pretty hopeless. The bishop is completely out of play. There's no way to control the a1 square in just two moves. You would love to somehow get the bishop to like b2, but just takes too long. So I'm going to give you guys the first move, bishop f6, and now a2. And I'll let you guys think for a little bit in this position, white to move. We know black's next move. You have to figure out how not to let black to queen. Yeah, c4, only move. And now black really only has one response, king c5. If black takes en passant, and we simply recapture with the bishop, and this is actually a win for white. The fact that white is controlling these three squares pretty much creates a barricade that the king can't pass. And also the bishop controls a1, so white will very simply win this by walking the king back, probably picking up the pawn first. And in the meantime, there's nothing black can do. Make sense to everyone? So c4, king c5. Now I would guess a good number of chess players would resign in this position as white. It seems like a1 queen is coming. What to do?
Bishop e7 check.
Yeah, bishop e7 check. You delay promotion for one more move. But then what? And now white can actually resign.
Maybe king b7. No,
King b2?
king b7.
King b7? Queen?
Bishop e7.
Louder.
Bishop E7. Bishop E7.
Check. What about checkmate?
Checkmate.
Turns out white was winning the whole time.
This thing is in the way.
Completely unexpected, but this is mate. And sometimes when your opponent's king is in the center and you just have bishop, couple pawns, you're not thinking about mate.
I saw the ideal and then I moved
Yeah.
it a little bit over.
And sometimes you see the idea before you see the actual move. If you see that black's king is sort of limited on squares, you might start looking for ways to control all the squares.
So if they don't promote right away then?
So if they don't promote, then black's in Zugzwang. Black would have to move away from the d pawn. So some move like king, after king b7, let's say king b4, we just take the d pawn, easy win. Yeah. So yeah, earlier I said white to move and draw, but this is just winning for white. Bishop f6, nothing black can do. Okay, any questions so far? Okay, we'll keep moving on. So in this position, it was about creating counterplay. It was black had a strong threat of promoting, but we had a bigger threat of mate. And we'll see that occur a few more times. Let's look at this game, as I wanted to incorporate a few games in addition to the puzzles. So when I was preparing materials for this lecture, I thought I would show this game. It's actually the very first game I played at the St. Louis Chess Club. It was back in 2010. I qualified for the US Junior Championship, and it was the first time they held the juniors at this location. And in the first round, I was paired against Ray Robson, who is now my current teammate. At the time, he was the top seed in the tournament. He was actually, I believe, the only GM in the field out of all the juniors. And it wasn't easy playing him first round because I was the lowest rated player in the tournament. Most people were over 2,400. So we were playing a pretty hard-fought game, and we got to this position where it's very, very messy. And I will say that we were playing with a time control where you get an extra half hour on move 40. So leading up to move 40, we both had probably under 5 minutes left. And if I recall correctly, he played the move king h7 with a few seconds left. And king h7 turns out to be a pretty bad blunder. I'll leave it open to you guys. White to move and play the completely winning move. 96, yeah. Simply forking the rook and the queen, and whatever black does, you take one of them with check. So when I played this move, I was, of course, very excited. I'm beating the top seed. I thought he was going to resign. I would just win. But that's not Ray's style at all. He likes to fight. And if he has any hope or any life in the position, he will not resign. And you'll see this in a lot of his games. So he continued the game. He played queen d2. And actually, one of my mistakes in this game was I got too emotional too soon. And that happens a lot in chess. When you're winning a game, you might sit back, relax, and think the position will play itself. But that's usually when players are most likely to make mistakes. So next time you're winning a chess game, or you think you're completely winning, still try and stay focused, because that's one of the ways people screw up lost positions or winning positions. And unfortunately, that happened to me in this game, because I didn't win this position. And I started playing the most obvious move, knight take f8, nothing wrong with this, king h6. And now I have a few options. Black is threatening mates in 1, queen h2. So any ideas how to stop queen h2 for white? Queen f4. Any other moves? Queen e3. Anything else? So during the game, these were the only two moves I considered, which was the first mistake. And I thought both of them were winning, so I played queen f4 quickly, and the game kept going. It turns out I could have ended the game right away. Yeah, rook e2, very good. And then, whoop, yeah. And this ends things right away, because I'm distracting the queen from the fourth rank, and after take, it should be force mate somehow. Queen f4, if g5, queen f6 mate, and if king g7, it's just mate there, or king h6, pretty nice mate with 96. So if I played rook e2, the game would have ended in a few minutes. But I missed rook e2. I played queen f4, which is still winning, but it gives him chances to come back, and he made full use of these chances. So take. I'm up a full rook, so I thought nothing of it. And it's move 41, so we both got an additional half hour, so time pressure isn't a factor I have to be concerned with. Yep. But the a-pawn, yeah. And actually, I went to the bathroom after playing rook take f4, and I came back, and then a2 was on the board. And then I realized it wasn't so easy. Even though I'm up a rook, I can easily just defend the first rank. I could play rook f1. I realized that he has some ideas of bishop a6, bishop d3, rook b2, maybe put the rook or bishop on b1. And also, I'm a little bit tied down to the e-pawn with the bishop on the same diagonal as my king. So, so I realized this is not easy to win. And what's that?
I was thinking h4.
Oh, h4.
Maybe a rook f7.
Yeah, you want to create the mating net. Right, h4. Yeah, maybe h4 would have been better than what I played. Maybe g5, rook f6, king g7. Oh, you want to play rook f7. Bishop take e4.
Oh, I missed that.
It's complicated.
Yeah.
And maybe even after h4, maybe rook b1 is slightly better. But there's all these tactics for black that white has to be concerned about. So what I did in this position, simply play d5 to block out the bishop, which wasn't a bad move. Gets rid of all these bishop take e4 ideas. Ray plays rook b2. And OK, now the idea is very clear. He wants to play rook b1 and then just promote the pawn. So in this position, I went pretty wrong, and then I actually had to save the position myself. Turns out white has a brilliant way of winning this, and it's really not that obvious. I think if I gave this position to like a strong GM, they would have to think about it for a little bit. So I'm just going to show you guys the win for white. It's to play rook f7. And the whole idea is just creating a mating net. The threat is rook h7 followed by 96 mate. And the idea is, after rook b1, rook b1, I'm sorry, goes into the same thing, rook h7 and 96 mate. What did I want to show? Oh yeah, king g5. And now the idea is that white will succeed in creating the mating net. Any ideas for white? I'm actually struggling to remember this. Because I remember the idea, it was something like rook e f1 or rook g1. And I think I'm just going to go ahead and cheat, because this is really just a computer solution, assuming the engine is strong enough. Komodo. Oh, there's sound effects. Rook g1.
I've never heard that before. Was
Really?
that supposed to happen?
I don't think so.
I think so. I think it was a fan.
What was
not? So the idea being, okay, rook b1, king h2. And okay, this is a computer line, and really I put myself in a situation where I probably would have had to find the computer line to to win the game. And it was a bad situation to put myself in, but as we can see, okay, mate is coming. If h4, we just take 96. That's pretty sweet, mate, with rook h7 next move.
So you're just making sure that when they promote, they're not promoting the check.
Exactly, yeah. So this key move, rook g1, followed by king h2, not the easiest thing to find. So if we go back, I didn't play rook f7. I played a worse move. I played rook f6, which threatens mate, but allows king g7. And then I had to move back with the rook. And actually, I chose the wrong square here for the rook. I played rook f1, which I think draws the game right away. I still have one more chance to win by playing rook f3. And this applies to a lot of endgame situations, where if you're choosing a square to put your piece, you usually want to choose a more active square. And rook f1 was certainly more passive. With rook f3, the idea would be to play rook a3 and defend from the a file. And am I missing something? Rook b1. Oh yeah, rook b1, then I would play rook f1. And okay, it's not a clear win now after a1 queen, rook take b1, but white certainly has great winning chances here with the two rooks versus the queen. So I'll show you what happened in the game. Rook f1, bishop a6. So I'm up a full rook, but now he's getting enough counterplay to the point where I have to be very careful. I played knight e6, king h6, and then I found a repetition, and I just went for it, realizing that if I allow bishop d3 followed by bishop b1, I could easily lose. So I played rook f8, and then black really has no choice but to also take the draw after king h7, knight g5, and then it's just repetition. King h6 is never possible due to rook h8 mate. So it was a slightly disappointing round one for both of us, because he drew a player 400 points below him, and I drew him up a full rook. So it goes to show that sometimes you shouldn't resign. Even if it looks losing, you should continue playing and try and get counterplay and try and complicate matters, because that's how you're going to come back and save worse or lost positions. Speaking of never resign, let's take a look at this game. I don't want to embarrass anyone, but I guess I'm sort of forced to with this game. So we're going to jump straight to the final position. Now, since the theme is coming back from worse positions, I thought this game fit in pretty well, because it looks like black is just winning here after the move king h6. Black is simply threatening to queen, and white doesn't have any checks, and if white plays some move like queen c2, then black will simply play queen f1 and then promote. So the question is, after king h6, should white resign, or is there a way to play on and actually save the game? Queen b7. So black will play the same idea. Queen f1, king h2, queen. Now white can resign.
I'm suspecting it's like a king move, so they're not promoting with the check.
The problem is if you move your king, you allow b1 queen.
Right, but maybe.
So the key component about this position for white is creating counterplay. And you have to do so in a way which also defends against the threat, defends against b1 queen. So look for a move which aims to somehow exploit the king, but at the same time keeps an eye on the b pawn. That queen b8. The only move. So queen f1 check, king h2, And black has no time to queen because queen h8 mates. So it turns out that the best black can do here is give a perpetual. Black has no way to create anything because there's a mate threat, and if you cover the mate threat, like king h7, you just lose the b pawn. So the game probably would have ended very quickly after queen f2, and just both players can agree to a draw. So this can be very painful, resigning in a position which is like just completely drawn. But it does happen, and it happens to much stronger players. But the key thing is never resign if you still feel like there's life left. And even if you don't feel like there's life left, don't resign. Let me move on. Let me show you one more example of why you should never resign, no matter the opponents. A funny example. Karpov versus Polgar. Maybe some people have seen this, at least this endgame before. Karpov, I mean, played his typical Karpov style, completely outplayed Polgar, and he got into a completely winning position. I'm not actually sure if this was like a blitz or rapid match, but for some reason, Polgar wasn't resigning, kept playing on, even after Karpov promoted. And in this position, white made the terrible mistake, queen f3, and it's just stalemate. And this thing happens, and that's why even if you're playing like a much higher rated player, don't resign, because if Karpov can stalemate a player like, or if Karpov can stalemate a player like this, then anyone can. Doesn't happen too often, but it pays off if you're not resigning, and it does happen. So let's move on. Let's do a few more puzzles which kind of stay with the theme. Okay, I'm going to give you guys a few like king pawn endings because I think these are a little overlooked in terms of what people study. And I know like most people are not good at the endgame because they prioritize studying tactics and openings. And I think it's important to have like a good foundational endgame understanding and to know some kind of famous concepts and being able to apply it. So this is famous position named after Reddy. This is white to move and draw. It looks like black should win by just pushing the h-pawn, but I'm assuming at least a few of you have seen this before. And I think I might just walk through it for those of you who haven't seen it. White will draw by moving the king closer to the black pawn and the white pawn. And to do that, you have to move on this diagonal. And this is one of the interesting things about geometry in chess. When you move along the diagonal, you're actually moving closer to both pawns. So first move, of course, king g7. And now there's a few different variations here, but we'll start with simply h4. Let's say king f6. And now black has two moves. Let's say king b6. Simply going after the c pawn. White to move. If you know it, you can shout it out louder. Yeah, king e5. Just continuing along the diagonal. And this move is actually a fork. And you're not forking two pieces, but you're forking two squares. You're threatening both king d6 and king f4. And depending on what black does, you're going to play one of these moves. So if black takes a pawn, you simply play king f4, and you have everything covered. This is a dead draw. And then slightly more complicated is if black plays h3, then you give up on trying to stop the h-pawn, and you go and support your c-pawn. And after h2, you're just in time. If h1 queen, c8 queen, and if king b7, then just king d7. And it's a dead draw. Let's look at one more line. Let's say after king g7, let me test you guys. Let's say king b6, white to move. King f6 still, yeah, and it's pretty much just a transposition. What if h4? King e5, same exact position, very good. So this is kind of the simple idea. Now, next position I'll show is a bit more complex. And I've shown this to students before, where they'll solve this position and then they will just completely freak out on the next position. This is a lot scarier. Black is up 2 pawns, basically 3 on 1. White to move and draw.
I mean, if you capture the G7 pawn, it becomes the same position as the last one.
So what's the move?
So king G6.
Oh, king g6. Let's say king b6.
Capture G7.
And it's actually very simple once you know the previous position. So this is now a transposition. Actually, if white plays h5, or if black plays h5, same exact position as we just saw. And just remember this fork with king e5. Now, there are a few other lines. Given that black does have 3 pawns on the king side. So let me test you guys. Let's see if you can draw in all these lines. Let's say h5. You have to capture a pawn, but which pawn? Yeah. So capturing h5 is actually a just decisive mistake. You're moving too far away, and after king b6, if you try and go back to g6, this is just an easy win for black, because eventually one of the pawns will promote. So I think by process of elimination, if we know we want to take a pawn and it's not the h pawn, it has to be the g pawn.
Yeah, instinctively though, I just thought it would be wrong because they can get their pawn, one square.
Well, it's kind of deceiving, but after h4, king take f6, it's the same position as last time. Actually, last time we didn't look at one line. We saw king b6 and then king e5. But what if h3 here? White to move and draw? Yeah, king e7. You just you forget about the h pawn. You're close enough to help your c pawn. And if king b6, you simply support the pawn, and both players will queen. So yeah, h5, it's slightly tricky. What about, let me see if I can trick you one more time. Let's say king b6. You take on g7. Now let's say f5. White to move. Yeah, king f6. Don't take the h-pawn, because you have to move closer to your c-pawn as well. So okay, f4. King e5, very good. So now you're actually forking a square and a pawn. If black allows you to take the f-pawn, it's a dead draw. And if f3, then you just go forward, king d6, and we see the same thing. And now, one might argue that there's very slim chances for black with the extra h-pawn, but this is a pretty easy draw, because there's pretty much no shelter for the black king.
But this would be black's best chance.
But this would be, yeah, if I had this position as black in a game and my opponent played perfectly, I would definitely go for this line with f5. So any questions about this position? Pretty high-level position, but I think if you understand kind of the elementary idea, then you can grasp this more complex situation. I've had this position myself in 3 different tournament games across the course of my career. And it's kind of a typical position you might get into, thinking it should be an easy win for white, rook and 2 versus just one rook. But I've seen a lot of people mess this up. Actually, the 3 times I've gotten to this position, 2 of them were draws. And both draws, I had the worst side, I had the black side. And both my opponents actually walked into some stalemate tricks. So I just want to show you one example line of how white could easily mess this up. And then I'll show you the correct way for white to win. So I'm just going to play some moves. I think I have the line saved. And this is usually the approach for white. White will just push up both pawns and the king. And let's say h7. Let's say g6. Doesn't seem like anything wrong yet, but it turns out g6 draws the game. black to move and find the easy draw. Rook c5, king h6,
Rook h5, check.
rook h5. And this is one of the problems a lot of people forget about, is the fact that black can give away the rook and just end up in stalemate. So when you're playing white, you have to be extra careful about this idea. And this same idea, it's called crazy rook or mad rook. It doesn't just apply to this position, but it really applies to any position where you have just a rook and your king stalemate and you want to give it away for free. So if we go back, white has to be extra careful not to allow these sort of stalemate ideas. So I'll give you guys a pretty simple technique to win this position. And I will say I actually had this, this exact position, or not this exact position, but this exact endgame less than a week ago in the last round of the Pan Am Collegiate Tournament. And my opponent actually resigned in a position like this without even going for stalemate tricks. I think my opponent just assumed that I would know how to win, which I did. So I guess there was no energy loss there. But the easy way for white to win is first to put the rook on a5. You want to put the pawn on g6 and not allow any checks on the fifth rank. And black is pretty much forced to wait. I mean, you can wait with the rook on the back rank or wait with the king by moving to h7. I should note that if the rook moves off the back rank, then there would just be a simple mate with g6. So let's say black waits and just plays rook b8. Then you're going to just put the pawn on g6. Black will have to continue waiting, and then you put the rook on f5. And now if you can remember the setup with the king on h5, rook on f5, pawns on g6 and h6, then this endgame pretty much becomes a no-brainer. It's just a matter of executing one or two more ideas. So black now has two choices. Black can either continue waiting with the rook or move the king, both of which white will have a very straightforward win. Let's say king g8 first. Easy win is h7, king h8, now king h6. And if we notice, there's no possible way for black to sacrifice the rook, and either g7 or rook f8 are coming depending on what black does. And I should note that if king g7, it's pretty much the same thing. You just play rook f7 check first, and then king h6. So the other option for black is to leave the king on h8 and just play like some move like rook a8. And this is one of my more favorite lines to show because I think it's pretty aesthetic in the way white wins. The move that I would choose here, and I was pretty upset that I didn't get to do this in my tournament game because I was planning on it, was play rook f8. Sacking the rook, but getting into a completely winning endgame despite not having a rook. If king g8, white will simply play king g6. And there's really no good way to stop h7. It's only move rook f6, and then just take, and this is easy win. If we go back, what move would you guys play here? What's the best try for black? King h7, right? The only other legal move. Hoping that white will not pay attention to what they're promoting to. Or if this is an online game, hoping your opponent has auto queen. In this case, chess-base doesn't have auto queen. You don't want to promote to a queen, and you don't want to promote to a rook. But you can promote to knight or bishop, and both pieces win. Bishop is maybe easier, and then you just make sure it's the right color square. Yeah.
Two white bishops.
But it's one of the rare examples of under promotion. So do you guys think you could win this as white easily against anyone? Against me, or against Ben Feingold, or against Magnus Carlsen?
I don't know, the current state of Magnus, I think maybe.
Yeah, maybe depending on the time situation.
Yeah, I was gonna say, how much time do you got?
That's true. And it's also very important to kind of have a general knowledge of like common endgames, because usually by the time you reach the endgame, you're low on time, and you want to make sure that you have like a kind of foundational knowledge to fall back on, so you're not having to rely on figuring things out, but you already kind of know what to do in the position. Like a machine, yes. Okay, let's move on. I have a few more king-pawn examples, which I thought I would show you because I've used these on occasion to trick my opponents and save very bad positions. So let's flip the board. This is black to move. Black is down the pawn, or down the pawn. Should probably lose. Should lose if white plays correctly. But this is black to move and be tricky. So you want to play a move for black which gives you some chances. A4, very good. And A4 is not a winning move, but it creates the most possibilities for white to go wrong. And sometimes that's all you can do when you're in a losing position, is just give your opponent chances to mess up. And this is interesting because now white has only one move to win the game. Someone said something. A3. Yeah, it's only a winning move for white. Everything else actually loses, from what I can see. Black is of course planning a breakthrough. Black wants to play A3 next. And if white goes wrong and plays something like C take B4, then black will play A3. And I've seen so many games, I played a few games where this has happened, and white will lose. So that's why when you're in a winning position, you of course have to look for your opponent's counterplay and opponent's ideas before you look at your own ideas. So A3 just blocks up everything. Whatever black takes, white takes back. And do you guys understand how to win this? You basically just walk the king over, forget about the g-pawn, and then win the queenside pawns. Okay, let's look at one more example. Okay, so another position, same theme. This is white to move. White is completely lost, but I'm not looking for you to find the winning or drawing move. I'm looking for you to create the most chances as possible. So what would you play as white if you're trying to trick your opponent? You would just resign, okay. Hopefully after this lecture you won't resign, even in a position like this.
I just want to lock it up so that there's only pawns on that side of the board.
Yeah, unfortunately G5 isn't that tricky. G5, black will either take or play H5 and then win on the queen side.
Right, but that's what I mean. It's like at least that way I know that you
Maybe just king b2 or something, just make a king move.
Yeah, king b2. It's not as tricky as you can be in this position. The trickiest move is H5. Because now you actually have a threat, and you're putting black in a situation where he has to be somewhat careful to not mess things up. It looks like you don't have a threat. It looks like black can just continue, play some move like king b4 or b4. But if this were to happen, white now wins, g5. And this is your threat. Very classic pawn break. And it's pretty amazing because you're breaking through with just 2 pawns against 3 pawns. But you're able to do it with first playing h5. And it actually probably hurts black to have the f pawn here because it looks like white's not threatening anything. But black would either have to play g5 or take. So after something like b4, g5, yeah, white wins. If take, you take, and you queen first. And if take, you play h6, and black is just not quick enough. Few winning moves for white, probably the easiest is queen a8 and just pick up the g2 pawn. So resigning is usually the worst possible move, or the worst thing you can do in a position, because you're not going to give yourself any hope to have any result but a loss. Let me show you guys one more game, and then we'll end kind of with the challenge position. This is a game which is probably pretty painful for my opponents. Actually, a previous GM in residence, Josh Friedel, I don't know if you saw any of his lectures. I know he's had some lectures on the endgame, which I've seen on YouTube. He's a very good teacher and very good player, but unfortunately in this game, he let me lose from a completely winning position. So I'm going to zoom forward. Let me put it in training. And you can probably see how bad the position is already for me. We'll just move forward. It gets worse. I was suffering most of the game. But somehow I kept holding on, kept holding on. And then we got to this position. Now it's still equal material. Rook and bishop and 4 pawns versus rook, bishop, 4 pawns. The problem is I'm white and I have almost no moves. If we look at what can move in the position, my king is completely tied down to the bishop. The bishop is pinned to the a pawn. Bishop is also tied down to the e pawn. It seems like the only piece that can move is the rook. But if the rook moves, then there's rook a2 check, or rook h2 check. And then I think it's just over after king e3. With rook h1 coming, or bishop being lost on d3. So I think a lot of players maybe would consider resigning this position. But white to move. And really using the theme from today is you want to look for ways to create counterplay. Even if your position's lost, look for ways to create chances. So white to move and try and be aggressive. Pawn c5. Take.
Rook c4.
Rook c4. It's pretty ugly for white. Maybe, okay, maybe it's possible. Rook h2 check. Yeah, not looking so good. The thing is, no line for white will look so good, but you want to look for a line which gives you some hope, some chance.
Yeah, I was trying to make e5 work so that I could, if he takes with the pawn, I could then push the pawn to the passed pawn, but you can just take with the king and there's
That's true.
there's nothing.
But that's what I played. I played e5. It's really my only move, which creates some sort of hope.
Yeah, because I was just trying to and then c5 after and then.
Sure.
But I don't know.
And he probably should have taken with the king, but he took with the pawn, which,
Well, then c5 then.
and then c5. Very good. It turns out it's still completely lost for white. I mean, I'm giving up pawns, hoping to somehow queen my b pawn, but it's not going to work if he plays accurately. And he just plays e4, threatening to take the bishop with the rook with check. I had to retreat, bishop f1, rook h2, king c1. And then he trades. And now, didn't want to go that far. Now it's his move. He has a variety of winning moves. He could take the c pawn, maybe the easiest way to win. Because after b6, there is bishop c8. And then, I know earlier we saw the king versus the 3 pawns, but this position, in 3 pawns for black, is more than enough to win. Another way to win is to simply play king e3. And then it's just a matter, if whatever white does, we play d3 check. And then I think the pawn just promotes. Without too much difficulty. If king c1, d2 check. If king c3, probably just d1 anyway, or d2, and should be an easy win for black. Yeah, b7, d1, and then simply mate. So there were many ways for black to win this, but he played one of the only moves which doesn't win. And it's actually one of the problems when you've been better for so long in a chess game and you're just looking to kind of find that knockout punch move. Sometimes it's not easy, and sometimes it takes a bit more focus than you would normally expect. And in this position, he got careless for one move. He plays d3. And now white's a move. Bishop takes d3, and now it's a dead draw. And wrong colored bishop, which I think Ben Feingold just had a lecture about, like within the last few weeks. Point being, if take, pawn takes c5, I play king c4, and I'll win the c pawn, and then the bishop is not the same color as the queening square for the a pawn. So d3 was played, I took, and then of course he realized that the position's now drawn, but he still tried to fight on. He took on c5. And I still have to be careful here because I am down a pawn, and he still has ideas of maybe taking the bishop, and white does have to be accurate. So any ideas, most accurate move for white here? Now bishop f1 is possible, but there's no reason to move the bishop if I can play b6. And that's what I played. And then I force him to retreat. Why not? He still can't take because of the same type of idea, I would win the c pawn. So he plays bishop to c8. I play bishop b5. And then it was just a simple matter of drawing the game. What ended up happening is he did win my bishop by playing e2, take, king c3, bishop a6, white to move and play the easy drawing move. Yeah, simply b7. The bishop is overworked, take, and then king c4. So even against a GM, if you seem completely lost, I mean, there is hope to come back. I keep saying that over and over, but I think too many people give up without trying as hard as they can. And hopefully this will help save you guys from losing or drawing some games. I don't know if any of you were here earlier today, but Fabiano stopped by. I saw him very briefly, and I regretted like not getting the opportunity to show him this puzzle. But if he ever comes by, I'll show him this because I think this is one of the most difficult problems that there is. And it's relatively simple. I think for, like once you actually know the idea, but I don't want to give too much away. So this is white to move. At first, it seems like white's lost. A pawn is going to queen. And I'll let you guys try and absorb this a little bit. If anyone has an idea for white to try and survive the game, feel free to shout it out. I will say that I don't think any of you will actually solve this.
I mean, h6.
h6, okay. I was waiting for someone to say h6. Let's say a2. Problem is you're just a little too slow.
Yeah.
h7, a1 queen. Oh, rook g7.
Yeah.
I see. King e6.
Okay.
I'll tell you there's a lot of lines like this where you might get some checks with the rook and the knight, but none of them work. And the idea is actually a lot simpler, and it's actually a one-move solution, amazingly enough. So I think what I'm better off doing is showing you the first move and then having you guys try and figure out why it actually draws. So I think like when I first saw this first move, I didn't understand it, but then there should be an aha moment where you'll realize why it's so brilliant. So the only move for white to save the game, knight h6. Looks like the most random move ever. But it has one simple idea. Let's say a2. Turns out there's nothing much better black can do in this position. Think back to the a queen we take.
I was just trying to think that the idea that knight h6 takes away a pawn move
Mhm.
I have to get rid of my rook.
So yeah, I know earlier, like we talked about stalemate ideas, we talked about like getting counterplay. I will tell you this position, it's perpetual check. Rook G7. And all you have to do is keep checking the king with your rook on the G file, and there's nowhere the king can find shelter. The king can't even attack the rook. Because the knight, the geometry with the knight, the fact that the king supports these squares. So we see a lot of beauty with the coordination. The fact that the pawn controls G6 is very important.
Is this ever in the game? Or is this
So this is a study, yeah. It's named, the guy who created it, his last name is Jaja, D-J-A-J-A. And this has been given to some of the top players in the world. There's been many top players who have failed to solve this. So, actually, I gave this to Ray Robson several months ago, and it took him about 5 minutes before he found knight h6. And maybe what's even more funny, prepare yourself for a sound effect. If we turn on Komodo, Komodo will not find knight h6. The idea is just too deep. It sees that black's queening, black's up material, and oh, it does find knight h6. But yeah, wow, computers got stronger. But it's still, I guess maybe doesn't understand that it's a draw.
Yeah,
But now, okay, now it's starting to see it. Yeah. Okay, now took some time. If you give it to Fritz, Fritz won't find it. Yeah. So I hope you guys can take away some inspiration. And if you guys have any questions, just feel free, let me know. But I think we're pretty much done. So thank you very much.